Okay. Tony put out the title Gold Rush 2025. I put the title out simply with one word. The reason is the gold rush has been going on for thousands of years. So why should we limit it just to this year? So what we're going to do in an economy of time and a little show and tell is talk about 3 periods of time. And the subject is a 4-letter word, and there it is. The first period of time starts with antiquity and ends arguably with Franklin Roosevelt after the Great Depression. But we could also argue that it really starts in 1973 when Richard Nixon suspended the gold exchange standard and gold and the dollar disconnected. Now they were connected for the history of the United States. So there's a debate as to whether you want to start with FDR, but since we had Doc Werlin and FDR, we don't want to blame him for anything, so we'll start with Bretton Woods 73 as the first change. The second change took place 3 years ago. So we have 3 periods of history, and we have a 7-hour lecture that I have to do in about 25 minutes. So let's see what we can do. That was the first gold coin. It wasn't a coin. Actually, in those times, before the coin was invented, if you went as a guest to a wealthy house and you brought something that was of wealth or significance or a gift, as is still accustomed today, you brought a stick of metal. Because in those days, you would be able to use it to eat. And the metal would be of what was available at the time, so it might be iron or it might be copper, but the stick of metal. And the Greeks created the word, and the term for that conveyance of wealth in Greek is obol, the name of the precedent to a coin. And it comes from a handful. Because if you went, and I was invited for dinner and I went to Nancy's house, I would bring a handful of metal sticks. And they would probably be copper or iron, if I had it, gold or silver. And that was the origin before there was a coin. Now, how many in this room heard of King Midas? Which one? There were several of them. They're in mythology. We all know the history. One of them made a deal with the devil. Maybe he paid the price for it, maybe not. I wasn't around. There are people in this room who were, but they don't remember. So anyway, what we do know is the first coins were a blend of silver and gold in what was then the kingdom or empire of Lydia. And Lydia, if you think of the map of the regions, think of, say, a stretch of territory that goes from Turkey across towards Iran today. Lydia had silver deposits and gold deposits, and it was a trading nation. And it was in Lydia that the development of the coin, instead of the stick, took place. And the first coin is believed to be a blend of gold and silver, and it was called electrum. I think that's really a term that's derived from the Greek at the time. And that's what it looked like. Now, there may have been other coins in antiquity, but that's the original history. Quick history lesson. Lydia was conquered. You remember the Cyrus the Great? So that the sequence became Persian. And in Persian, the king, who was known for gold, was Croesus. And Croesus was the emperor who loved gold. So all he did was build on tradition and mythology all the way back to ancient times that were ancient times for him. When Greece defeated Persia and the Battle of Marathon, which was about 2,500 years ago, or the war between Greece and Persia, when the Greeks succeeded, coins and money changed. Why? Because Athens had silver mines, huge silver deposits, and they had the slave labor to work the mines because they won the war. And in those days, the victor got all the captives that survived from the side that was defeated, and they became the slaves. So Greece had silver. That's how the drachma, silver, became the dominant currency in the region instead of gold. There has been tension between gold and silver throughout history. Silver is more abundant than gold. Doesn't weigh as much, and as we now know today, it has industrial uses. And if you go to a gold hoard, a gold bullion, Fort Knox or the New York Federal Reserve Bank or London, if you work there, you have to wear special steel boots, because if you're handling with a piece of equipment, a piece of gold like this, which weighs a lot, and it drops on your foot, it'll crush your foot flat to the floor. So there's special attire.
David?
Yes.
Gold is the most malleable and ductile metal. So in those situations, it is unique.
Gold is unique? Tell them why.
Gold is the most malleable and ductile metal around. It also has this stability.
So, history of gold through Greece. In the Peloponnesian War, Greece, before the war, had a huge cache or hoard of silver. And that's how it financed the war. In those days, you didn't borrow money to finance war. You had to amass a treasure because you had to pay your mercenaries. The Peloponnesian War lasted 30 years. All this period was a period of study in my book because of the plague in Athens, which was in the first year of the Peloponnesian War. Peloponnesian War lasted 30 years. Athens exhausted the entire treasury fighting the war. They actually then had to mint a form of a drachma, which was a debased currency, a diluted currency. They lost the war. Everybody here I know is a Greek scholar and remembers exactly what happened. The 30 tyrants from Sparta took over. Took them a year to destroy everything. And then democracy was restored in Greece. Fascinating history. There's a debate as to why. Scholars would argue the Greeks learned the value of democracy so deeply that they wanted it back. We'll see. That's what the history book says. What else did they do? Greece restored the drachma, reopened the mines, and reissued the drachma to replace the debased currency. They took a little haircut between 3 and 5%, and the assay value of a drachma was reinstituted. In other words, they restored the value and credible value of the monetary system and did not debase or dilute or destroy the value of the currency. Ancient Greece. And the drachma, the silver coin, circulated in the Mediterranean for hundreds of years because it was trusted. Fascinating. Rome, on the other hand, debased and destroyed its currency repeatedly, had hyperinflations, destroyed its banking system, suffered 3 plagues. The emperor put his picture on the coin and said, this is the law of the land, and this is what you'll use for money, no matter what it's worth. That would never happen today, of course. Okay, there's the modern version, gold bullion. Having been in a couple of central bank vaults, I've seen this. It's quite a sight. In the world, there are centers which are safety hoards by governments and agencies. The big market in gold in the Western world is dominated by London. There's a bullion exchange. And in America, in Chicago, by the COMEX. There's another one in Shanghai. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. That will explain why gold is now $4,000 an ounce. You'll see it coming in a few minutes. And several others in the world. Where they are and how credible they are is a matter of decisions made by those. Christina and I, on one trip, were in the airport free zone in Dubai. And in the airport free zone in Dubai, there is a gold safekeeping hoard, and there is actually a cryptocurrency or a stablecoin linked to a gram of gold that is supposed to be in the hoard in the Dubai free trade zone. It has never caught on. It's been around for years when we were in Dubai. Why? Because the people in that section of the world don't trust the safety of that gold hoard. They do in London. A friend of mine, Paul O'Brien, was the chief strategist for the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. And he told me the story about how the sheikh ordered the group once a year to go to London. Now, the sheikh decided not to use Dubai, which is right next door to Abu Dhabi. Right next door, 50 miles in a car. The sheikh, once a year, sent his group to London to count the gold bars that the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund has in the vault in London. So, gold bullion, that's what it was. I'm going to show 3 things. I'm going to ask Christine to help me here. you're going to see 3 coins, and don't throw them in a fountain. This is a silver dollar from a century ago, when a dollar in silver was part of the distribution in the United States. This is a $20 gold piece, a double eagle, and it's about the same age. And it was the currency of the United States, 20 bucks. The price of the gold content today would be 4,100, I think.
How much?
Since this is a coin, it would have a premium value. So it's, I don't know, 5,000. Please don't lose it. And this is the rarest of the 3. This is a $1 gold coin from around the time of the Civil War. The first mint in the United States was in Philadelphia in 1793. So, show and tell. In 1793, now if you think about the history of the United States, we have Declaration of Independence, we fight a war with the British, the Continental Congress issues paper money, Continental dollar. They inflate it, debase the currency. It's almost worthless. If you remember the phrase, not worth a Continental, they were not talking about a Lincoln car. We get a constitution, we empower the Congress, and included in the powers in the creation of the government of the United States is coins, the responsibility for the money. And the Philadelphia Mint went into business in 1793. There were, at one point or another, 6 mints in the country. And there was a debate in the country for years between silver and gold. The great election of Grover Cleveland, the famous speech of William Jennings Bryan, don't put the country on a cross of gold. The debate between silver and gold raged until after World War II. At that point, the United States essentially said no more silver. The political decision was made. So there was a period of time of gold versus silver, and the ratio in history until recent times was somewhere around 12 or 14 silver to 1 gold, or 15 or 16 or 17. When Sir Isaac Newton, who was an alchemist as well as an observer of the world, determined the ratio properly, he said it should be 17.2 silver to each unit of gold. How he got that, I don't know. He didn't tell me. And if you looked at the history of the world, you found that governments in different places set different ratios of silver to gold. And quickly, there was an arbitrage. If I was in a country and the ratio was 15 to 1, and I could get a caravan and move some metal to another place where the ratio is 18 to 1, I could swap metals and make a profit. And the other guy could do the same. And so we had different governments with different ratios. And we had wars over silver and gold because of the ratio. And we had thieves and robbers who would rob the caravans that were moving. And that's the history of the metals. 100 years ago or so, the United States decided it's going to be gold. And that's how we resolved the issue of silver to gold. Today, it's about 80 to 1. Gold wins. Throughout history, gold wins. Let's get to a more modern era. and we'll skip 6 hours of more history. If you look at the history of gold in the economic times that we're relatively familiar with, there has always been a surge in the price of gold, followed by, in 2 or 3 years, economic upheaval. Different types, different structures, but something about gold. Now, gold does not move in some sort of normal investment linear pattern. And there's a reason. Most gold doesn't transact. All the gold that was ever mined in the entire world, in the entire history of the human being, starting with Lydia, would fit in one room in a cube 70 feet, 72 feet is the estimate I saw, by 72 feet. That's how limited it is, how scarce it is.
It may be scarce, but you can break down that amount into very small portions.
I just passed around a $1 coin.
Well, $1 coin is small.
It's very
but you
small.
can process it
You
into
can-
a sheet
Yes,
that is about 1 atom thick.
yes.
Very, very thin. So a small amount goes a long way.
One of the reasons why we see a lot of it, it's that thin sheet. Don't worry, you'll have plenty to see in the new East Wing of the White House. There's a short history. History of the gold in the United States. We operated for a long stretch of time when the double legal $20 gold piece was the baseline currency. But we converted it to paper claims because if you think about it, who wants to carry around all that stuff? If you have a trusted claim, you can see it. And so I'm going to ask Tony to help me. And here are 2 bills. The top one is a silver certificate. At the time, the United States still was using silver. And it's a $1 bill. And it is a claim on $1 of silver at the then official weight held in the United States Treasury. The bottom bill is more unusual. It's a $2 bill. It has Jefferson's picture on it. And it is a claim on $2 worth of gold in the hands of the United States government. Both bills are signed by famous people. One is named Mellon, the other is Morgenthau, and both bills precede Franklin Roosevelt. You'll see the dates on them. If you can't see them, they're 1928, 29 error. So we'll send this one around. Those were the days when a paper claim on metal was backed by a piece of metal, whether it was silver or gold. Franklin Roosevelt, 1933, suspended gold, made a legal change in the value from $20, I'm going to round the numbers off, from $20 an ounce to $35. And then said, we want you to turn in your gold and we're going to give you paper money. And the United States essentially devalued the dollar by increasing the price of gold and making it illegal except for rare circumstances, meaning collector's items and jewelry, for Americans to own gold. So patriotic Americans turned in their gold, got paper in return. If you had a $20 gold piece, you got $35 for it. The devaluation occurred with no inflation. Why? We had a Great Depression. We had deflation during the Depression. If you think about when Roosevelt devalued the dollar, the unemployment rate was 25%. Remember the apple seller. So you can devalue against the currency anchor without inflation. And Roosevelt did. You could argue that by doing so, he restarted the economic engine of the United States. Now, there's a big debate about that. Like anything else in politics or economics, there's a debate. $35 per ounce was the official price of gold until 1973. Richard Nixon, during the period after World War II, the United States was on a gold exchange standard with other countries in the world, and as the dollar weakened against the other currencies, those currencies, those countries, those central banks would exchange the dollars for gold, and our gold hoard was shrinking. So Nixon suspended, I love the word in politics, suspended. Suspended says it's not permanent. It may be the next 400 years, but it's not permanent. So he devalued gold, devalued the dollar, and changed the official price of gold from 35 to 42. But you couldn't change it at 42. So that became the official posted price. And the United States stopped being on the gold exchange standard after leaving the gold standard under Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. Now it's 1973. We've covered a lot of history, and we got a lot to do. This is the last 20 years, and I've compared the price of gold and the U.S. stock market using the Standard & Poor's 500 index. So if you turn the clock back 20 years ago, and you had to choose between the S&P 500 index or gold, and you had X amount of dollars, whichever one you picked, 20 years later, you'd be in the same place. Now, it was quite a ride getting there. I don't advise anybody to try to trade the difference between these two. I don't know anyone who can do so successfully. Gold and its price change operate in a much different way than other traditional investments or securities. Where are we now? The gold price, as many in this room know, is currently double what it was just a few years ago. If you look at the trading history of gold, you'll find that it languishes for years and then suddenly goes up in price using dollars as the metric, and then it'll languish again for a whole bunch of years. It is very difficult. There are all kinds of people who try. They are modern versions of alchemists, and they try to forecast the price of gold. And when they get lucky, they're right, and they claim they're smart. And if they don't get it right, they lose, which is proof that it is better to be lucky than smart. If you can do both, then you really got something. What has happened with reserves. Most central banks, governments, the vaults, the hoards of gold, not the jewelry, but the official reserves, don't trade. They are constantly buyers and holders of gold. So when the price of gold goes up, the value of all the gold in a national reserve goes up. But most of the gold didn't move. It's been sitting in the same place for years. The price changed. What happened here in this last run? We hit a point at the peak of the gold price a few weeks ago where the total value of all gold in all central banks of the world, and that does not include the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, all the rest, equaled the total of all the treasury bills that they all held in all their claims in reserves on the United States. It's a remarkable thing. It made a lot of headlines. Did anybody go back and look at the old history? No. In the old history, when Bretton Woods had collapsed and the gold price was in the 70s or 80s or $90 per ounce, treasury bills were the large piece of reserves. Now, you might say, well, what about the United States? In the United States, the Treasury owns the gold. And in completing the exchange with the Federal Reserve under Roosevelt, the Treasury issued the Federal Reserve a gold certificate. Think of it as a huge number of zeros on the certificate that we passed around that you saw. That was revalued to 42 in 1973 under Nixon and by act of Congress. And it sits on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve today at $42 an ounce. If the Federal Reserve, if Congress today passed a law, and the President signed the law, and the law had one sentence, the certificate held by the Federal Reserve on the Treasury of the United States is now valued at $4,200 an ounce instead of $42 an ounce, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve today would add approximately 1.1 trillion of equity. Stroke of a pen only. How would the Federal Reserve implement that? It would print or electronically print 1.1 trillion out of thin air, hand it to the Treasury, meaning it would put the money in the Treasury's account at the Federal Reserve. Stroke of a pen. There has been no mark to the market on the reserves of the United States of America. As of today, they are on the books of our country at $42 an ounce. You don't see this? I was surprised that there weren't political attempts in the past to revalue, but the votes haven't been there. There is a law currently that says if that is done, then the money must be used to pay down national debt. That's a stupid law. I pay it down today and I borrow it back tomorrow. That makes no sense. So it hasn't happened. It can happen with a simple majority in both houses. Might be subject to a filibuster rule in the Senate, I don't know. And a signature by the President. There's an immediate $1 trillion equity right now today only by taking the $42 gold price and marking it to the market. Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, knows this. and the mechanics of how to do it are known. And there is a discussion in Washington now about something called a sovereign wealth fund of the United States. And in a few weeks, I hope to finish a piece that I'll publish on my report on how you could take the trillion and use it to seed the sovereign wealth fund and rebuild the entire electrical grid system of the United States without a single dollar of borrowed money by the United States government. Just create $1 trillion in equity in a sovereign wealth fund, then go to the private sector and let them join it, and go to investors and let them join it, and rebuild the entire grid with clean electricity for the entire country. There are models of that previously. We did canals, we did railroads a different way. There are ways to do this. Whether we'll see that in the next year, I don't know. That's a political debate. The only thing you can know about politics is whatever good it'll be, they'll make it worse. Okay, how did gold get to $4,000? Second question is, what happens next? In the Western markets for gold, like I said, there are only really two places that count: Chicago and London. All the others don't matter. So if you think about how they operate with an electronic claim. Mike wants to buy gold. He buys a futures contract. He buys a certificate. He buys a claim. Somebody else sells it. At the end of the trading day or the end of the trading period, weeks or months, they net off the difference in price. So 99% of the trading in the entire G7 countries in the Western world in gold is done netting off the claims, not physical delivery of gold. No, there's a little, but not much. There was a big deal about how there was a physical transfer of some gold from London to the United States. And because it showed as an import into the United States, and because somebody didn't do the research, they put a tariff on the importation of a gold transfer which was coming from the London Bullion Exchange to the New York Fed vault. Bizarre. If you're in the economics business, you said whoever did this was an assistant intern who had not completed the undergraduate course in basic economics. But of course, hiring policies are not up to us. In the Western world, we settle claims on gold by netting them out. It's very efficient. 3-4 years ago, we did something. We froze Russian assets and made a claim in the banking system. At the same time, we have been using sanctions and banking system tools as a form of pressure or war. The Chinese are now in competition with us in a payment system. There are now 30 countries in that payment system. The largest one is Indonesia. So if you are in a payment system and you do not want to be observed or traced or tracked by something, the acronym is called SWIFT, and it's an acronym for the payment system that settles claims. It has correspondent banks around the world, and the SWIFT payment system nets off claims. The Chinese introduced a new version. It's called CIPS, C-I-P-S, and that acronym is based in the Shanghai locale, and the gold hoard for China is in Shanghai, not in Beijing. And that system is an alternate form of payment. So if I'm in Malaysia and I have a trade in the ringgit, that's their currency, and I'm doing business with somebody in China, we can net off our trade. I owe you in your currency, or you owe me in my currency, but we don't trust all the currencies. And we're outside of SWIFT, which means there is no tracking mechanism for the United States or the Western countries to know about our trade. It's outside of the payment system that we're all used to and use every day, and we don't even think about it. So they had to anchor the payment system. And they have a technique where they have a physical deposit of gold. The Chinese officially purchased 230 tons of gold last year. There are guesstimates that the real purchase was 3 times that. We don't know. We net off the currency, and the difference becomes a physical claim on an actual amount of gold held in a vault. There are now 3 vaults in the world. The big one is in Shanghai, and the expansion is to have 8 in different countries. So when I want to do a transaction, and I'm in Russia, and I'm in the ruble, and I want to transact with somebody in another country, and I don't want the Americans to be able to see it. I don't want anybody to know. I can use a blockchain transfer, do the transaction in my currency, ruble, to renminbi in China, tie it to a link in gold, settle it in gold, and the gold, so many ounces or whatever metric you want to use, is in a physical vault, and it moves to my account, all instantly in a blockchain system. 30 countries are now trading based through the Shanghai exchange. Now, what is the security that trades in Shanghai? It's called a warrant. And it is a claim, a paper claim, that is settled with physical delivery of gold, not netted off the way Mike and I would have done a futures contract with London or Chicago. That is the recent transaction in the warrant on the Shanghai exchange in China. That's why the dollar price of gold shot up through the roof. Because most gold never moves. This system is moving a small amount, and the rest of it isn't changing. Just the price is changing. So, why did gold go to 4,100, 4,200? Why did it go up so much? You can directly relate it to Chinese demand for the physical metal. How much will they demand in the future? Nobody knows. Where can the price of gold go? Nobody knows. So, the conclusion is, gold, whether we like it or not, whether we call it names like the barbaric metal, which is what economists are taught to call gold when they go to school, is irrelevant. There is a force payment structure in the world. It's rooted in a different payment system than the dollar-based Western world SWIFT system. There's an anchorage to physical gold, and its largest center is in Shanghai. And that's in 45 minutes, an explanation of 3,000 years of history that started with that first coin and ended in Shanghai.